Hey, what's going on? This is the Body Punch Podcast, and my name is Naz. Let's talk about UFC 287. The results of UFC 287 in the main event. Israel Adesanya gets his belt back from Alex Pereira. He defeats his all-time rival, who he clashed with in kickboxing and once in MMA for the title. Israel Adesanya was able to knock him out in the second round in Miami, winning one of the most exciting and electrifying rivalries in the UFC. What an amazing fight. What a way Israel Adesanya climbed back on top of the mountaintop. But we're going to talk about all the fights at UFC 287, including Masvidal retiring and the likes of Kelvin Gastelum shining bright in UFC 287. What a great showcase for all of these fighters. Miami coming back there after a long hiatus, almost about 20 years. And let's talk about that. The last time that they went to Miami, they did a gate around $400,000. Around 20 years ago. Dana White, super ecstatic, saying that this is one of the all-time greatest gates of all time, beating out spots in Las Vegas, beating out the Garden itself in New York. And they're definitely going to come back and make Miami one of the big destinations for the UFC. They did a $12 million gate here at the new arena, which was the sixth highest grossing event in UFC history. The gate was about 19,000, sold out. What a way to come back to Miami. Looked like the stars were out. Whoever you could imagine was there. The former president, Trump, was there as well. Mike Tyson, and the list goes on. Big time event, brought out a big star-studded crowd. And what a way to come back, like I said. Back to Miami, back to this exciting city. And exciting in the sense that there are so many fighters that fight near this arena. And they still didn't come back after some time. And, you know, this was a big time event for them. And you know, all these fighters were begging the UFC that we need to come back to Florida. And one of the main reasons was Masvidal. We'll talk about that later on. But to talk about some of the performances, to talk about some of the fights of the night, let's talk about it. Israel Adesanya got the performance of the night bonus. Also went to Rob Font, getting that nasty knockout, you know, in somewhat of a plum, getting that uppercut knockout. And like I said at the beginning, fight of the night, Kelvin Gastelum versus Chris Curtis. And we'll talk about some of those fights more in depth. But to run through the whole card, Gilbert Burns defeating George Masvidal. Masvidal, one of the main reasons why they came back to Miami. The king of 305 was defeated in somewhat of a lackluster performance by himself. Meaning that, you know, it just, Masvidal looked his age. He looked like someone that, you know, like I said at the beginning, he did retire. He looked like someone that was somewhat stuck in the mud. Gilbert Burns showed why he was at the number 5 spot, who hopefully is going to be going up. But Masvidal was at the 11th spot. You know, it's unfortunate for him because if Masvidal did win this fight, it was Leon Edwards next. Gilbert Burns, interestingly enough, said to the UFC and Dana White in particular that he's looking for a title fight. And if he does not get a title fight, then, you know, release him from his contract, being super aggressive with the UFC and Dana White and saying that he wants the winner of Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington. Interestingly enough, he didn't say that Colby Covington was not deserving of it. Obviously, he believes that he should be the one fighting him next, but he is more than willing to be the backup fighter for that main event fight for the 170-pound belt, the welterweight belt. Now, that fight presumably is happening in England, again, in the UK. Somewhere in the UK, let's see where it happens, but they're going to announce that sometime soon. I think Dana White announced that they are planning on going back to the UK. They just haven't given a date, and they just haven't given the name of who's fighting on that card. But we're assuming it's going to be Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington. Okay, so another one that won the Performance of the Night bonus was Rob Font, and he got it against Adrian Yanez, taking him out in the first round. Again, another reason why number 6 defeated number 12. Another reason why the person who was at the top, who did take off a couple, I think it was almost 2 years or 1 year. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Rob Font took it off from fighting, and he came back with a bang. Adrian Yanez, known as one of the great boxers in the UFC thus far, especially in that bantamweight division, was on a run, and Rob Font took him out. He took him out by being super aggressive against him in the first round, and like I said, getting him with that uppercut shot that, Yanez allowed him to, grab the back of his head, plumb him a little bit, and getting that nasty knockout against Adrian Yanez. What a way to come back. What a way to cement your spot in the bantamweight division, who some are calling the best division in the UFC. And it's up there against 155-pound division. So Rob Font, the mainstay in that bantamweight division, gets the win against Adrian Yanez. Kevin Holland defeats Ponzinibbio. And this was a great fight because it showed how Kevin Holland was able to slow things down and not always trash talking throughout the fight. It seemed like about 2 minutes in, he would start trash talking in each round. But put it on Ponzinibbio. He said that he didn't want to hit him with hard shots and just tap him here and there, and then found the opening and took out Ponzinibbio. Ponzinibbio protesting after the fight, saying that it was an early stoppage. I think it was perfect. Ponzinibbio was down on the ground, and he wasn't doing much, and Kevin Holland was able to take advantage of that and take out Ponzinibbio, who I think at the beginning of the fight, many people thought that Ponzinibbio would be a big test for Kevin Holland, but didn't see him as a big-time threat, which I think was wrong. Ponzinibbio, big-time threat to anybody in that division, and obviously super tough. And Kevin Holland was able to weather the storm, stay calm, not trying to take him out in every single scenario, and then also getting some nasty knockdowns due to a back fist with his leg up in the air. Reminded me of that one scenario that he was in with Jacare, where he knocked him out while he was on top of him. Or what? Yeah, he was on top of him, and he knocked out Jacare and then flipped him over and then went back on top of him. So, Kevin Holland has some nasty power in awkward situations. And he was able to display that against Ponzinibbio in this one. Rahul Rojas Jr. gets defeated by Rodriguez. Rodriguez, 25 years old, and Jr., I think he's like 18 now. So super young, but, he's facing a super young guy in Rodriguez. And it seemed like Jr. was trying to take him down the whole fight, was not standing and trying to trade with Rodriguez. And, that wrestling can take a lot out of you. And so the train of Junior has been kind of derailed a bit. But like Dana White mentioned, and I totally agree with him, everybody goes through this kind of stuff. And, he is going through his formative years. in the UFC. Meaning that a loss like this would be something that you would assume would happen somewhere outside of the UFC, which, many people have had losses like that, like Alex Pereira. Aside from the loss tonight, his only loss ever in his young career was outside of the UFC. So that's one example, but now we're seeing what it's like for Junior to experience that in the biggest organization in the world in mixed martial arts. So the train's not fully stopped right now, but this is a little speed bump in the road. Let's see where Junior goes from here, and let's see where Rodriguez goes from here. Again, just to note, Rodriguez did miss weight, so he did have to forfeit some of his purse to Junior. So, he needs to get that under control before he can make a real run at anything. Get that weight under control. Unfortunately, that is something that Junior had to deal with. And I think many people aren't talking about that, how, Rodriguez did miss weight and Junior had to deal with that. And, his main game plan was his wrestling. So obviously weight plays into a lot of things, but, I would assume it would play a lot more in wrestling than many people are thinking that it would. Chris Curtis gets defeated by Kelvin Gastelum. Kelvin Gastelum looking like primetime Kelvin Gastelum. If you watch my pre-fight show, you know how high I am on Kelvin Gastelum. Some of his fights against like the likes of Tim Kennedy, against the champion Israel Adesanya. Some of his big time wins have been so special. The boxing ability of Kelvin Gastelum is next to no one. I think the commentary crew really said it perfectly that, Kelvin Gastelum moving to fight ready as opposed to his other camp is really helping him. And, training with the likes of Henry Cejudo is always going to be a big time help. So Kelvin Gastelum looking like he's on another level thus far, but let's see if he's able to keep doing that in the UFC. And really excited for him. He's super young still. He's like 31, 32 or something like that, in his early 30s. So it looks like Kelvin Gastelum has a lot of miles on him, but, age-wise, he's super young. Michelle Waterson-Gomez lost in her fight. A lot of people thought that she won. It's unfortunate for her. She's getting near the tail end of her career. We'll see what happens with her next. But, it was an interesting fight to watch and interesting to see how a karate master and a judo master play against each other. And so, a lot of these judo people, we've noticed that how much they like to bite down on the mouthpiece and really throw leather. And, that's what won this fight for Luana. So, Joe Piper beat Joe Piper. Big time win against Gerald Mershaw. We've seen Gerald Mershaw go against some of the best in the division. He's lost to some of the best, but he's also beat some really good fighters. He's that person that's, right at the gate of doing something special. And if Joe Piper can do this really early in his UFC run, which he has done, he's so big for that middleweight division. I mean, Joe is super big, but Gerald Mershaw has fought the likes of, Hamza Shimaev, and he didn't look that small as compared to when he fought Joe. But, obviously Hamza did look pretty massive against him, but, and on top of that, now that I think about it real quick, but Hamza has fought at 170, so he does look massive against some of those 170 pounders. But against Gerald, he looked relatively small, but I mean, Joe looked gigantic in there. The reach advantage that he had was, was amazing, and he used that to his full advantage. A bunch of other great fights on this card. Cynthia Calvillo losing, which was, Let's see what happens to her next. But, it's tough, especially the skid that she's been on and especially the time off that she's taken. It's always going to be tough for everybody. But a bunch of other great fights. Great card overall, but let's talk about the main one. At UFC 278, Israel Adesanya faced Alex Pereira. And what happened in this fight? Israel Adesanya said that he played possum against the fence, and in round 2, at 4 minutes and 21 seconds, he got a KO victory, flatlining Alex, who looked super scary walking in. And Israel Adesanya was able to take him out in this fight. What an amazing, what an amazing fight. And what if you watched Israel Adesanya's whole camp on his YouTube channel and, him talking about it, him and his coach talking about it, they were talking about how to do stuff different. And it's funny because his coach, Eugene, kept mentioning how he didn't like how Israel Adesanya was showing his training footage all over the place. But I think it really psyched out Alex. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that, Israel was talking about how he was going to use his wrestling, showing how he's going to use his wrestling in this fight. But look at it. 0 takedowns. I know we only had 2 rounds. 0 takedowns, though. Israel Adesanya threw 96 strikes as opposed to Alex, who threw 85. I know Alex is more of a power puncher, but Israel landing 41, Alex landing 49. Israel Adesanya, 43% of those strikes were power punches, significant strikes. And those significant strikes, the ones that he threw, were such a big deal for Israel Adesanya against Alex Pereira. He went into the fire with Alex Pereira. Even though it was 43% as opposed to Alex, it shows how Alex was really going after Israel Adesanya like he was in the previous fights. But the only difference here, and we only saw it in 2 rounds, was even though Alex was hitting with a lot of shots to the calf and all this kind of stuff, what I really saw out of this was, instead of Israel Adesanya relying on something that he is not accustomed to doing, he went into the fire against Alex and allowed himself to have a little rope-a-dope with Alex and waited for that opening, which is really dangerous to do against Alex, but he was willing to do it. He was willing to risk it all against the man who had followed him from kickboxing, the man who took his belt away from him in the UFC. This was supposed to be Israel Adesanya's thing. Alex came over and ripped it away from him. And to wait for that opening the way that he did, he knew that Alex likes to keep his hands low. And having his hands low, can be a good thing. You can't see the strikes. You can't see where they're coming from. That might help with the power that he displays. But then also the problem is that exactly what we saw can happen. It wasn't the same. It wasn't that exact same thing that happened to him in his kickboxing loss via knockout, his last one, his retirement fight out of kickboxing. But what Israel Adesanya showed here was so special that he was able to stay in the pocket with Alex and wait for that one opening. You can imagine how much pressure was on Israel Adesanya going into this fight. I don't even know what Israel Adesanya would do if he lost this one, I mean, he would have to fight someone that he's already fought. He's cleaned out the division. And then there's this one guy that he can't defeat. But he was able to figure it out. He was able to do it. And it was amazing. And you saw in the training footage, you saw in the way that he was acting after the fight, how much this meant to him. You know, shooting those arrows, falling on the ground, and going after Alex's kid like that. It shows how much it meant to him. What an amazing fight at UFC 287. I mean, this is one that we're going to be talking about for the rest of the time. This is the one that, you know, even with Israel Adesanya's post-fight speech that he gave with Joe Rogan, I mean, it's totally true. He had it all bottled up, which is amazing. You know, and it exploded after this fight. The way that he was talking, and the way that he was talking before compared to now, before in the pre-fight press conference, as opposed to right after the fight, it shows how much he bottled it up. Thinking about it, you can't imagine that, because imagine thinking about this every single time you're taking that long flight from New Zealand to Miami or Vegas or New York or wherever he's fighting. And to keep wanting to do that, to keep coming back from your home country, and then thinking about this crazy fight that he has against his arch rival, and then being able to take what's yours back from him. Let's see what happens next. Dana White mentioning that Alex is thinking about going to 205. I would really like to see the Yuri fight, you know, if he's not going for the belt right away. I was listening to a podcast on to the next one, MMA Fighting, and they were talking about Khalil Roundtree for his first fight. Man, what a fight that would be. I just rewatched his fight where he came out right from Thailand and was showcasing that Muay Thai off. And what a fight that would be. Israel Adesanya, let's see what he's up to. I mean, honestly, I would be down to see a rematch, you know, a rubber match between these two. They're one apiece in MMA. I think a lot of us are thinking that kickboxing fights are brought into this equation, but this is a different sport. So let's see what happens. But the middleweights have their king back, and all-time great performance from Israel Adesanya. What a great win. So thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. If you could like, subscribe, hit the bell notification and all that good stuff, I'd really appreciate it. Leave a comment below. What do you think's next for the champion? What do you think's next for Alex Pereira? And yeah, like, subscribe, bell notification, all that good stuff. Again, leave a review on all the different podcast networks if you can. It really helps out. I appreciate it. Thank you again. My name is Naz. This has been the Body Punch Podcast.